Welcome back to The Last Generation. Today on the program, we have our guest speaker, Christian De Los Santos. He is a pastor and a public speaker, and he gave a presentation on the power of focus. This is one you're really going to enjoy because it's going to allow you to see how your focus can help you get the things out of life that you really want. It's something that I've been applying since I heard the talk, and I really enjoyed it, so I think you will too. Stay tuned and enjoy.
So several months ago, I went on a mission trip to South Africa. I enjoy traveling, and every so often I get these opportunities to go on a mission trip. And I was in a pretty rural part of South Africa. We're doing different things, mission work and helping people with health issues, also doing different meetings. And as we were going in our different groups, we met someone that we were trying to encourage in their spiritual walk with God. So this person at first was a little standoffish, but they opened the house, let us in. And as me and several in my group were talking with this lady and with some of her grandkids, she starts to open up a bit about her experience with church and bad experiences she's had where people have broken trust, where she starts to get close to people and then, she makes a mistake or kind of rub people the wrong way and has experienced a lot of unforgiveness towards her, which maybe we can relate to, right? Had some bad experiences in churches. And so, she starts opening up and saying she recognizes she wants to get closer to God. She's reading the Bible, but there's a lot of things she doesn't understand and that she would like the support, but she's struggling because of those bad experiences, which totally get it. It's very understandable. And as we're here trying to encourage her, because her experiences are very real, very valid. She says something along, she words it in this way. She says something along the lines of I want to go to church and I want to find a community, but I'm just scared that what if I get close to people and the same things happen again? Like, what if I start to build trust and then I get hurt again? What if I start to get connected and then the same thing happens that has happened before? And I share with her something that I learned some time before that, which I really think, God works things up in sometimes ways that just don't make sense to us, but then later on we're like, wow. And I share with her, I said, that phrase, what if, has two sides to that coin. I said, one side is, what if you start trusting people again and you get hurt? What if you try this church and it doesn't work out? What if you go to this group and it doesn't work out? And I said, but you can flip it, the same phrase, and it'll have the opposite effect. What if you go to this group and it's actually what you're praying for? What if you open yourself up to the possibility again and you actually don't get hurt? What if you open yourself up and what you're praying for and desiring for someone to show you the Bible is actually what God blesses you with? And so it's a powerful lesson of the term what if can infinitely discourage you and it can infinitely encourage you. It just depends on what way you use it. So today I want to share with you something that has massively impacted my life, which is the power of focus, is what we choose to focus on. I heard an illustration once, and you can do this in whatever room or area you find yourself now, if you're in your car, your house, whatever, is if you look around the room and you try to find a certain color. Let's say you look around the room and you're trying to find green. And just look around the room, wherever you're at right now, look around, try to find everything that's green, right? Like you can find, okay, one thing's green, the cover of this Bible's green, this in the corner is green. You can find a couple things that are green. Now if I switch it and I say, okay, look for everything that's white. You start to find, okay, this is white, that door frame is white. You start to find a lot more things. And by looking, it doesn't mean that it didn't exist before. But by intentionally looking, you start to notice things that you probably didn't notice before, and more of them. And so this principle of whatever you focus on, how it impacts our lives, might be bigger than you think. And it's very simple. You might have heard, recognize this in some kind of ways, but when we intentionally apply this idea of focus, it'll revolutionize your life. So I want to go to a story in the Bible in the book of Numbers. Book of Numbers, fourth book of the Bible. There's a story where there was a really bad situation, and this idea of focus was almost too good to be true. So Numbers chapter 21, we'll begin in verse 4, and I'll read down to verse 9. It says, speaking of the children of Israel, then they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. And the soul of the people became very discouraged on the way. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? for there is no food or water, and our soul loathes the worthless bread. So the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. Verse 7, then therefore the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he may take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. And it shall be that everyone who is bitten, when he looks at it, he shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. And so it was, if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. So just some context, because it sounds kind of like, God just sent snakes out of nowhere, but it's not. We kind of do a little deeper study, you realize they were in the wilderness. There was a bunch of snakes anywhere, venomous snakes, and God was protecting them. But here's a moment where the children of Israel needed to learn a lesson. So God removes his protection, and now these snakes are biting people. I don't know if you like snakes. I don't. But the idea of getting bit by a snake in your tent, in your house, and venomous ones is a problem. And so people are dying. Like, they're dying. They're in pain. People that they love and care for are dying. Again, these are not just, like I'm here in Virginia. In Virginia, we don't have that many. At least it's not that common to have. We got rattlesnakes and copperheads, but mostly it's like rat snakes and stuff that are not venomous. But having a venomous snake that can kill you and have them all around is a problem. And so they're now like asking God for help, and God intervenes, and God is merciful like that, because he could have said, hey, you guys asked for this, but God is like, here, I'll intervene and I'll help you. But what he does is awkward, because it's so simple and it solves their problem effectively, but it's almost like counterintuitive. Like you would expect something like more like profound, like deep, like get us some medicine, touch the bite area. And he's like, no, like just set up a bronze serpent, and whoever looks at it, like all you have to do is look at that thing, and the venom inside of you is going to be healed. And, I'm sure it must have felt so dumb, I guess, just be like, hey, just look at the serpent, you're going to be healed. But I think there's a massively powerful lesson. And there's a lot of lessons here, and of course, this is kind of a prophecy about Christ being lifted up on the cross. But in a side lesson is, all they had to do to be healed was adjust their focus. If they were to focus on the bronze serpent, they would be healed. If they kept their focus on the problem, which it's easy to do because it's painful. If they were to focus on the problem, like, oh man, I just got bit, or the snake is still there, let's go kill the snake. If they were to focus on the problem, if they were to focus on the pain, they would die from it. But if they were to focus on the bronze serpent on the pole, and even just as hard as it felt, but they were just to focus on that, they would be healed. I want to go to another verse, Isaiah chapter 26. Isaiah chapter 26. This verse has become, pretty popular. I've seen people put it like in a wall frame in their house and stuff, and rightly so, because it's a good verse. But there's a really deep lesson in here. I like psychology, so stay tuned for these videos, because a lot of these videos are going to be based on mental health and practical tips on that. Because I think it's powerful, and there's a lot of that in the Bible. There's going to be a video specifically dealing with the gospel, because sometimes we separate it. We think like theology and the gospel and spirituality is one thing, and physical health or mental health or social is another thing. And biblically, I don't see that. Biblically, I see that God is concerned with everything about us, and especially psychology and our mind, because that's everything. So there's a powerful principle in psychology. Isaiah chapter 26 and verse 3. It says, you will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. So another synonym for stayed is focus, right? You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is focused or locked in, is just like gripped on you. So if I were to ask you, do you want perfect peace? What would that look like? A picture that comes to my mind is perfect peace to me. I guess a visual is like a man sitting on a chair, kind of like I'm sitting now, but outside in the midst of a massive storm. Just like, it's just raining cats and dogs, like they say, right? It's just pouring down rain. And I just picture somebody just like getting drenched, like just dripping, but their face is just so chill. They're just like, just unfazed by all the rain. Perfect peace, it's easy to be at peace. It's easy to be relaxed. It's easy to be chill when you just got paid, when it's payday, when you just got good news, when everything's going right. But I feel like the definition of real peace is when everything is going wrong and you're still fine. And here, I don't think this is hyperbole. I don't think it's an exaggeration. I don't think it's just, fluff of saying that God can keep you in perfect peace. It's true. And you see it in a lot of the Bible characters where their peace did not match their circumstance. But we often want to focus on the outcome and not the formula. Because what's powerful is that the verse gives us a formula. It's saying, don't focus on trying to produce perfect peace. Put your effort into focusing on God, and the natural result is going to be that you're going to be in perfect peace. So one of the key realizations or mind-blowing discoveries, I guess discovery, in the past 100 years in psychology is neuroplasticity. So I don't know if you've heard the term neuroplasticity before, but neuroplasticity is basically the ability for your brain to be plastic, but not plastic like hard plastic, plastic like Play-Doh, like moldable, like movable. So for a lot of human history, most of human history, they thought once you're 30 years old, 25, 30, once you're an adult, pretty much you're screwed. Like the rest of your life, you can't change, which is very encouraging, right? And there was a man, he's a neuroscientist, Michael Merzenich, that he kind of challenged that theory. And it's crazy because he proved that your mind is plastic, is moldable, has the ability to change beyond adulthood. Like once you reach an adult, it's not like you're stuck. And then, of course, there's been a lot of other people, Dr. Marianne Diamond and many others, that have really now kind of just jumped into that topic and demonstrated that you can always change. So the idea of an old dog can't learn new tricks is not true. The difference is, though, that when you're like under 25, your brain is extremely moldable. Like it's just like kind of adapting connections just left and right, just almost like just naturally, just by experience. But once about 25, and it's not a hard cutoff at 25, but about 25, your brain, it can change, 100% it can change, but now it has to be more intentional. And there's specifically different chemicals that are involved, like acetylcholine, adrenaline, that manifest itself in two ways, in alertness and focus. So, which is why, like, if you get into a bad car accident, that becomes memorable. And which is why trauma is memorable, because you're very alert in that moment, right? Everything kind of heightens your brain to danger. And unless you got hit in the head and you forgot those memories, whatever you focused on in that moment is locked in. Your brain is like, we never want to experience this again. And so we will 100% remember this lesson. Versus you might have been in school or learned some new fact and you forgot the other day because there wasn't a lot of alertness, there wasn't a lot of focus if you're an adult. So the brain is designed that if there's tremendous alertness, tremendous focus, it will record that and it like imprints it on your brain when you're sleeping, actually when you're in deep rest, which is a side note as far as health and the importance of sleep. But it marks it so that you never have to repeat that again. That's a good and a bad thing. I mean, I guess it's more good than bad. It could be bad in the sense of that's why we remember trauma. But the good element of it is that you can intentionally use that to your advantage. Manipulate sounds like a bad word, but you can use this formula of knowing how the brain works to intentionally remember and train your brain in a new direction. And so there's an element, and the key is alertness. We can have some power over. The biggest one we have power over, though, is focus. Whatever we focus on in that experience is going to shape the direction we go, which is why in a traumatic experience, you can have two people that have the same traumatic experience. One person is absolutely destroyed. The other person is like somehow better. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are negative beliefs that are developed, but one of them is what you choose to focus on in that moment, right? One person may choose to focus on the hurt done and decide to take away from that people are horrible, right? It might be a relationship, with an ex, with a man, with a woman, and they just decide, because of this experience, 1, 2, or 3, all women are horrible, or all men are this way, right? They focus on one element of it, and that becomes their story. Other people, they focus on the positive, and that becomes better. And so we have a choice into what we focus on is going to direct not only our energy and our behavior, but that is what's going to be ingrained in our minds. And so this idea of focus is like, it does take training, it does take practice. But when we start to realize that you and I have much more control over the things we focus on than we realize, it's like a hack to producing the outcomes we want to produce. So let me give you some examples of what this looks like, because hopefully this is not too confusing. But let me give you some examples of what this looks like, and hopefully it'll make some more sense. Let's go to Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14. Here's an example of how focus directs behavior, focus directs energy. So Matthew chapter 14, this is the story of John the Baptist. This is actually where John the Baptist gets killed. And starting in verse 6, I want to read something interesting here. But when Herod, so Herod's the king, but when Herod's birthday was celebrated, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod. So just let me pause real quick. Herod has a party for his birthday. He has a bunch of important people there. You know, he's a high-ranking official. He has a bunch of people there, and he has his party, right? Herodias' daughter comes and dances and pleases Herod. Verse 7, therefore he promised an oath to give her whatever she might ask. So let's pause again. We can all relate to this. Herod wasn't definitely by far the most godly guy, kind of the opposite. But we can all relate to you're feeling good, you're feeling excited, your friends are around, you want to show that you have power. So he says, hey, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. He's trying to impress his friends. Verse 8, so she, having been prompted by her mother, said, give me John the Baptist's head here on a platter. Verse 9, and the king was sorry. Nevertheless, because of the oath and because of those who sat with him, he commanded it to be given her. So some context. John the Baptist and King Herod did not get along, but King Herod greatly respected John. And he recognized John was a man of God, even though John called him out for his sins. But he recognized there's something special about this guy. He didn't want to kill him. That's why it says he's sorry. You know, he didn't expect that. He thought the Herodias' daughter would ask for, like, hey, give me, I don't know, a couple $1,000s, or give me some money, or give me a house or something. No problem. But here, of course, Herodias, she did this on purpose. She's like, I want John the Baptist's head right now on a platter. He's sorry because he doesn't want to do it. He feels the conviction, even though he's not a good guy. But we all have a conscience. You know, you could be Christian or atheist or whatever, but we all have a conscience that pricks us when we know something isn't right. And he doesn't want to do it. But I want you to notice, in light of this topic of focus, what does he focus on? So you look at verse 9. He's sorry. He doesn't want to do it. But then it says, nevertheless, because of the oath, right? So he promises her, and because of those who sat with him. So he looks at his friends and he's thinking, I'm going to look dumb. I'm going to look like an idiot if I go back on my word and don't follow through with what I promised her. So he's looking at all his friends. He's thinking, I'm going to lose respect. I'm going to lose people's trust. I'm going to look like a fool. And I just think it's so interesting that is what precedes, that is what starts his action, is he focuses on, what are people going to think of me? If that room had been empty, he would have been like, forget it, I'm not doing this. But because he's got all his friends and he's trying to impress them, he focuses on that, and that is what then leads him to follow through with the action. So imagine if he had just changing the story, because someone told me something powerful. They said, what you find in the Bible, these stories are what happened, but it's not what had to have happened. Like, Herod could have made a different choice. I wonder what would have happened if Herod in that moment had focused on the fact that he knew John was from God. And we see this, there's plenty of evidence about that, because that's why he was also excited to see Jesus later on. If Herod had thought, I'm not going to be able to sleep, my conscience is going to bug me later on for the rest of my life if I do this. If he had focused on, yes, I'm with Herodias, but this is coming from her. This is not actually her daughter's request. This is coming from her. This is a scheme. If he had focused on, this is not right, I think his action would have been different. But again, he focused on, what are people going to say? And that led his action to carrying out something he did not want to do. Let's go to another story. Same chapter, just further down. This is a different character. Matthew chapter 14, beginning in verse 22. So Matthew 14, same chapter, we go to verse 22. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. Verse 23. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there. Verse 24, but the boat was now tossed in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Verse 25, now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it's a ghost. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. Just a little side note, this is not a little petty storm. If you remember or look up what the disciples had various different jobs, like Matthew was a tax collector, several of them had different jobs, but a lot of them were fishermen. These guys are used to being on the ocean, right? Like, I'm not an experienced person at being out at sea. So if there's a storm, I don't know if it's, level 1 or level 10. Like, it's all, I can't tell. These guys can tell. So when you have a fisherman that is used to being out at sea and he's scared about the storm, like, just imagine, it's like being on the plane, and you feel some turbulence since your first flight, and then you hear the pilot, nervous and screaming and saying, like, guys, this is bad. Like, at that point, you're like, we're gonna die. Just, we're done. So the fishermen are scared. They're like, this is a bad storm. Jesus walks on the water. They can't even tell. They think it's like a spirit. They're like, it's a spirit. And they're freaking out. Jesus calms them, and Peter asks something kind of bold. So verse 28, Peter's not sure. He says, Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. So Peter is experiencing a miracle. He's walking on water. This is not natural, right? Something crazy. He should have been like, oh my, like, this is definitely Jesus. This is a miracle. I can't believe this. Verse 29. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down, verse 30. But when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. Verse 31, and immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? Again, this idea of focus. Peter's experiencing a miracle, right? Something that's just, it's not natural to experience. He's amazed, but then his sight, his focus shifts from Jesus and what God is doing for him, and it shifts to the problems, to the wind being boisterous, to the waves. He's looking at it and he's just like, this is worse. Like, we're in the boat. We thought we were going to die. Now I'm outside the boat. Like, what is happening? He shifts to the problem, and notice what happens, right? He's walking on water. He's living a miracle, but he looks at the waves. He looks at the problem. His focus shifts from Jesus to the problem. And then his action follows. He starts to sink. Now, Jesus is merciful, extremely merciful, and that he helped them. Jesus wasn't like, hey, let me let you drown a little bit so you can learn your lesson. It says immediately he stretched forth and he helped them. But here you see the same principle of focus. It directs his action. It directs our energy. It always works that way. If Peter had just stayed looking at Jesus, he would have been fine. And again, you can't blame Peter, because how many of us do the same thing, right? Like, you're praying for God to intervene. You're really going through a hard time in your life, and you're praying, and then God starts working. You're like, okay, this is working. Thank you, Lord. And then the problem comes back, or you focus on that problem again, and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't understand how God's going to work through it. We do the same thing. But the encouraging thing is, the formula, we can have success in it. If we learn from that and say, you know what, as hard as it is to not look at the problem and how strong this wind is, I'm just going to try to focus on Jesus. If we do that, we won't sink. Let me give you one more example. John chapter 5. John chapter 5. And we're going to start in verse 6. John chapter 5, beginning in verse 6. This is a miracle that Jesus did. But again, with this idea of focus, pay attention to the wording as I'm reading here. So John chapter 5, beginning in verse 6. When Jesus saw it, let me start in verse 5. Now a certain man who had an infirmity 38 years. Right? So this man has been sick a long time. Verse 6. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said unto him, Do you want to be made well? Verse 7. The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, rise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. Can you notice, can you guess what I'm about to say already? Can you notice what's happening here? Jesus has healed a lot of people. Jesus is the miracle worker. And Jesus comes to him and says, with compassion, like he sees this guy's been suffering a long time. And Jesus says, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be made whole? And what does the guy focus on? He starts to explain his problem to God. He starts to explain how bad a situation is, right? Do we not do the same thing? He's like, he doesn't even answer the question, yes or no. He just says, before I can go in, people beat me to it, right? I can't, my situation's too bad. Like I've tried, it doesn't work. I've been here for so long. He doesn't realize the person he's talking to or the power of the person he's talking to. And do we not do the same thing? Like sometimes we have like in our prayer session, we're like convincing God of how big the problem is. We're like, Lord, you don't understand. Like, I don't see a way out. Like, this is too much. This keeps happening. This is such a bit, like, we're like explaining to God the problem. And I'm not saying don't vent to God, but what I'm saying is sometimes we focus so bad on the problem that like, it's almost like God is like, I know, like I can deal with it. And we're like, no, but you don't understand. And like, we're like trying to convince God that he can't deal with it. And God's like, yeah, like you can't see how to deal with it, but I can. And so again, this man's focus is on the depth of his problem and how complicated it is. He's like, I can't see a way for me to be made whole. But Jesus has ways that he can't even think of. And the same thing comes to us is, and in all these stories, what is amazing is that, God is merciful. Because with Peter sinking, with this man, Jesus could have said, fine, you don't want to be made whole, that's fine, I'll leave you there, But God is patient and compassionate. But he wants us, though, to learn this lesson because we can learn it, of not focusing on our problems, not focusing on the difficulty, on the challenges, but focus on the solution, focus on the positive. And this is not some positive fluff of just saying, ignore the evil as if it doesn't exist. But it's about perspective. It's about recognizing that, yes, the problem is in front of me. Yes, this is bad. Yes, this sucks. Yes, this is painful. And there's a God that can deal with it. And that's real and that does care about me. And that God has ways I can't even think of. And that he will intervene if I ask him to. And so it's recognizing and choosing to focus. It's choosing to pick not the negative what ifs, but the positive what ifs. What if my prayers, God will answer them? What if things actually will work out? A key element to how this plays out in practical life, because this principle is just a law of the universe, like God has said, is focus directs your energy. And it applies to spiritual things, it applies to physical things, it applies to everything. Some years ago, I learned to drive a tractor. I was doing different farm work. And I learned a trick. If I was going to cut grass, this works on a lawnmower too. If I was like a riding mower, if I was going to bush hog a field, I noticed, usually you'll cut one pass and then you cut the other line and then you cut the other line based on your previous line. The problem is if one of your lines are crooked or like a little slanted, the rest of them are going to be crooked and slanted, right? Because you're patterning off of that one. I found a trick that you can have 11 lines that are crooked, and this one trick will make it straight in one. So if you drive a tractor or a lawnmower, this is a little hack for you. When you make your turn and you're coming around to the next line, you're about to start your next line, I would pick a spot at the other end of the field, like a pole, a piece of grass, or like a tree branch or whatever, just whatever's on the other end of the field, wherever I want to go to. And then I would just stare at it. I would stare at it and drive on the tractor. It was a long field. It'd take like a couple minutes. And I probably look like a creep because I'm just staring, driving. But when I do that, if I keep focused on that thing and keep driving, all 11 rows before could be messed up, could be slanted. That one's perfectly straight. And then when I make my turn, now I pattern it off of that one. And it's just a kind of a explanation of this principle is whatever you focus on is where your energy and where your actions are going to go. And your brain is going to mark that. Sometimes you meet people that always complain about everything. It's too hot. Job sucks. Pay is too little. This person said this. This person talks too much. These people are smiling too much. Like people that complain about everything, right? And I'm not saying I don't complain at all. So this is a lesson for all of us here. But there are some people that complain all the time, and there's some people that are always positive. And I want to challenge you that the way to fix that is this principle, is focus. I heard something on a podcast related to this that it said, when someone asks you, how's your day going? You say, I had a bad day. Was it really a bad day, or was it a bad 5 minutes that you let ruin your entire day? Was it a bad moment, right? Like the whole day might have been okay, but at 9 a.m., at 8:30, at 10 a.m., you had a bad interaction with somebody. You walked into the building, into school, into work. You walked into a building and somebody didn't say hi to you, or somebody spoke to you in a wrong tone, or you got a text that really annoyed you. And now the rest of your day is ruined. And it's like you let one moment, 10 moments, and I'm not judging you because I've certainly done this myself, but it's a reminder that I can let 10 minutes, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, an hour ruin 24. If I stay focusing on that. There are sometimes there are some people where human tendency where it has been trained to where you can go on a vacation, but just the plane ride on that vacation, something goes wrong. Your flight gets delayed. You order some food and they mess it up. It's uncomfortable. The person on the seat next to you is snoring and the baby's crying and you have a horrible flight. And there are some people where the whole vacation is ruined because of that. Like a couple hours, one day out of a week, out of 2 weeks is ruined. And the thing is, that moment is over. But if you stay focused on it, that moment will replay in your head. And so this idea of what we focus on is where the energy goes is way more powerful than you think. If you want to start training your mind to be positive, to grow in this method of trying to enjoy life, trying to enjoy the best, trying to focus on the solutions and not the problems, it takes training and it takes intention. Again, neuroplasticity, it takes focus of saying, of recognizing, okay, I'm usually kind of negative, but I'm going to try to stay positive. I'm going to try to focus on the good. I'm going to try to focus on God. I'm not going to focus on how big this problem is. I'm going to bring it to God and focus on how big God's power is and how he wants to help and how he can help in the situation. We train our brains in that direction, and I guarantee you'll start changing. Your attitude will start changing. Your behavior will start changing. And even your feelings will start changing because life is going to be so much better. I want to go to one last verse, Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. It gives us an encouragement and it gives us an example, right in the same passage. So Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, but I'm going to read verse 2 first. Verse 2, it says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus on the cross, he was human. He was God, but he was also human. And he didn't endure that in the strength of divinity. He endured that as a human. That's why he died. And he wasn't just like, oh man, these nails are just great. It was horrible. It's a horrible situation. In Gethsemane, he was sweating blood, which is an actual medical condition of extreme stress. There's not a lot of recorded cases where that's happened, but extreme stress, your sweat glands burst and it mixes blood and sweat. It's an extreme level of stress. So Jesus was not a walk in the park, right? He doesn't want to be in that situation. That's why he prayed to the Father 3 times. If there's any other way, let it pass. But it says what kept him enduring. It was the joy before him. It was the fact that human beings, that you and I could be saved from his sacrifice. And he focused on that. He focused on it's going to be worth it because of them. It's going to be worth it for their salvation. I'm willing to die. I'm willing to go through this pain if it means they're going to be saved, that they're going to have a chance at salvation. And because he kept that as his focus, he was able to endure the pain. It still hurt. It still was tough. It still took his life, but it kept him faithful. It kept him from getting off of that cross. It kept him from just being like, you know what, forget it. This is too much. If he had for one moment focused to the extremity of his pain, we wouldn't be here. This whole world would have been destroyed. We would have been done. If he would have just focused on, man, I'm dying for these people and these Pharisees and all these scribes, they're all against me. If he had focused on them, if he hadn't focused on the fact that I'm giving these people that I love so much an opportunity to be saved, he would have walked off. Now, verse 1 before is it encourages us to do the same thing. Therefore we also, Hebrews 12 verse 1, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And then it says, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, and it explains his example. It's saying this is how we're to go through life. is to learn from Jesus' example. Focus on the good. So I want to give you a challenge, a practical challenge, how you can apply this to your life, is you can start today, do a 7-day challenge of writing down at least 5 things, 5 specific things, like be very specific. 5 things you are thankful for, 5 ways that God is working in your life, 5 blessings that you have experienced. And just let yourself marinate. Take 5 minutes, write them down. I challenge you to do that for 7 days and just see how it impacts your life. There's a story of these 3 boys that were walking home on a snowy day, and there's a bunch of snow on the ground, and 3 boys are just horsing around. And an old man sees them, and the way the story goes is that this old man says, "Hey, let me give you guys a challenge." And so 3 boys are just trying to have some fun. Sure. Says, "I'm going to go stand on the other side of that field. We're going to do a race. Whoever wins, I'll give you some money." So they're all excited. Okay, let's do this race. And the way I've heard the story goes is that they all line up for the race. And he says, the winner, though, is not going to be the one that gets to me first. It's once you all arrive, we're going to look back at the tracks. And whoever has the straightest tracks is going to be the winner. And so okay, it's a nice little twist. All right, let's do it. And so he stands on the other side of the field, ready, go. And they take off, and these 3 boys are just running, and one of them is just running. He's trying to look at the other one. He's just like, that guy's crooked. That guy's crooked. But if you ever try to run while you're turning your head, what do you think happened? Every time he's looking at the other guy, his tracks get crooked. One of them, the other one, starts running, and he's just like, forget the other guys. I'm going to focus on myself, and I'm just going to look back. So he's running, but he keeps checking his own tracks, making sure they're straight. But if you ever ran, turning around, you can already imagine what happened. His tracks aren't straight. The third one says, forget both of them. I'm going to just stare at the old man. And he takes off. Can you imagine who won? The boy that just focused on the old man. The cool thing is that he also had the most fun, because he didn't just focus on the other person. He didn't even focus on himself, the stress of thinking of his own tracks. He just focused on the old man, and he won the race. The reformer, Martin Luther, said, when I look at myself, I don't see how I can be saved. But when I look at Christ, I don't see how I can be lost. And so my encouragement to you is, whatever you're going through today, whatever's in your life, may God help you and I to focus on Jesus, to focus on God, to focus on the power of God, and to train our minds and be patient with yourself. Because if you have, we're human. Like God, these stories show us that God recognizes human weakness, and he works in spite of it and is patient with us. So be patient with yourself, but also be intentional to recognize your patterns. That, okay, maybe I have a pattern of always being negative, or maybe I have a pattern of always complaining to God in my prayers instead of thanking him. Maybe I have a pattern of always describing to God how big my issues are and not focusing on his ability to solve them. If we recognize these patterns, we submit it to God and we say, God, I want to work on this, and we start training on it. He promises that he will give us the perfect peace, that we can arrive to that place where whatever happens in life, we can be at peace and satisfied in him. So may you take that lesson and may it transform your life. I guarantee your life will be much better by following it. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the program. Don't forget to check out our special offers. Today, we are offering Ancient Prophecies on Mysticism, Hollywood, and the Music Industry. As many of you know, I came out of the film industry, and the things that are in this book are a lot of the reasons why I came out of that industry. So if you're interested in that, you can check this out. Go to the link in the description, and all of our contacts are in the description, where you can contact us at Heartland Publishing and get yourself a copy of this. Also, Habits That Heal. This is a book written by Monica Fukuda and Dr. David Fukuda on how your lifestyle can affect your health. Really great information. It's a short, quick read with a lot of really great notes and points. So these are both available to you. You can contact Teresa, and she'll get you these at your convenience. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join our online and our physical magazine, Last Generation Magazine. And we want to just give a special thanks to Josiah Pedregosa for the music he's provided. He's produced all of our music in-house. If you guys want to get access to that music, if you want to purchase it for download, you can go to our Patreon page, and all of that music will be available to you as well. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.